Hello and welcome to the Not a Guru podcast. I'm one of your podcast hosts, Tyler Smith, certified athletic trainer, certified strength and conditioning specialist. I'm also here alongside the prestigious Dr. Heidi Cook. We are here to help you with personal development, personal growth, and really building a foundation that lasts you your whole life. We're so excited you're here today, and let's jump in.
Howdy ho.
Good evening. How are we doing?
We are doing okay.
We're doing okay. The day was not what we wanted it to be, but we're doing okay.
You're doing okay. Let's just say this week is not what we wanted it to be, but that's
Yeah.
okay. It
We
is.
navigated we navigated it, right?
We
Everyone.
navigated it.
Yeah.
Yes, we did. It was a very sad week this week in the cookhouse. I don't want to talk about it too much because I've done a really good job of holding it together all day. And but we had to, I know we talked about last week how I had to stay home for Thanksgiving and we canceled plans because Gus wasn't doing super great. Well, Sunday morning of this week we had to put Gus down and it was heartbreaking and all of the things, but yeah, he's running free now. So
Yeah. He's
very,
in a better a better place as far as we know that he's not suffering or anything like
yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly. So like I said, can't talk about it anymore. I've held it together all day. And by holding it together all day, I mean I only cried once.
There we go. We're down to one, which
We're
is not
down to
bad.
one a day.
It's always hard. And like I said, we've all kind of been there before, and it's never an easy endeavor in any fact. So
No. And then we're, recording almost 40 minutes late because I couldn't get my shit together. I finally got Cal down and then I was gonna scarf dinner down. Well, it turns out the cooker wasn't on, so the dinner that I thought was gonna be ready and prepared for when I had 5 minutes to scarf down my dinner before coming downstairs to record this was not there. So, just that was just the cherry on top of today. But that's okay.
good. That's all right. We made it through, and some days are like that.
Some days are like that. Um, but yes, it was almost comical today. But anyways, we're here. We're navigating it. And I don't, well, since I don't feel like I got put into a tailspin today, but I did start to spiral about all of the things we have on our calendar coming up and how underprepared I feel for literally every last one of them. So maybe I did let today get on top of me a little bit, if I'm being honest.
Do you guys have big plans coming up for holidays and stuff, or with Cal, are you gonna
And
be lay low, or what have we decided to do?
no, it's just so Sam hosts a Christmas party every year.
Yes.
Normally we host it at the house. That's not gonna happen with Cal because I'm not gonna have, 20 people whisper after 8 p.m.
It could be like a theme. Secrets. The
That
theme
could
is
be
secrets.
that could be the Christmas party theme. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Um, so yeah, we were like, okay, we have to like host it somewhere. And so we're like, just in classic Sam and Heidi fashion, like people have probably booked their Christmas parties like back in July at like different like locations to host it. And Sam and I did not. And anyways, it'll be okay. But then on top of that, I have never left Cal.
Oh, it's the first time.
Yeah, I've never left him. And people are gonna roll their eyes at me because he's like 6.5 months old. Uh, the only times I've literally ever left him was when he was really little and was sleeping a lot. I would feed him. He would essentially go straight to sleep. I would give him to Sam to hold while he slept for 2 hours, and I would leave the house and come back in time to when he woke up, I could feed him again. So that that's the extent of me leaving him. Um, Also, he went through like such a like mama's boy phase pretty early on where like he wouldn't let Sam like put him down to sleep, wouldn't take a bottle from him. And while we worked our way through all of that, uh I still put him down every night. Um and so like I can count on one hand how many times like somebody else has put him down at night. And not that Sam is not a like extremely involved parent, but it's just like, we've like chosen our battles, right? Like we've picked our battles and like that's not one that we have fought yet.
Yeah,
Because like if the put downs were like going smoothly with me, it was kind of like a don't rock the boat kind of a thing.
sure.
And anyways, so not only is it gonna not be me, it's also gonna be essentially, it's not a stranger, but like to him, essentially a stranger. Uh, it's gonna be his Kiki, which he loves, and everything it's gonna be great, but like, you know, the amount of time that they have spent together is very different. Anyways, I'm panicking.
Okay.
I think you can tell. And so it's just like, uh, but like it needs to happen, right? It
Yeah.
needs to happen, but I'm just scared that it's gonna be a disaster and it's gonna be a disaster on Sam's work party night.
It'll be fine.
It's
They probably won't even call you.
it's gonna be totally fine. He's
It
gonna be
is.
totally fine. He's gonna take his bottle totally fine. Anyways, um, so that is happening. Then we are gonna go up to Cheyenne for Christmas and spend Christmas with Sam's whole family, which is gonna be super fun. And then we are going to come home probably for like a night and then fly to the Tri-Cities and do second Christmas with my family since Thanksgiving got canceled. So that is what's on our agenda. And then as Sam was talking, we are taking a trip in March, which involves me leaving Cal for 5 days. And so we were
Ooh.
talking about that today because we're having to plan that right now, but like I can't even think about like I don't because like I don't even know. Like he's gonna be a totally different baby in 3 months from now. You know what I mean? So it's
Right.
like hard to plan for something that like you don't even know like where he's gonna be at.
Well, it's
Uh
good for you though, because I work with a coworker and I believe her son is somewhere between 2 or 3, somewhere in that age. And I was joking with her. I was like, "You're gonna have to come with us on the road to work as an athletic trainer." And she like had this look of fright. And I go, "What?" And she's like, "I can't leave my son. I've never like not been there all night long. She's never spent a night apart from her son. And I believe he's like over 2 now." And I was like, "Okay, then we have to." And I was like, "But your husband's going to be there." And she's like, "Yeah, that's not the same. I need to be there." And I was like, "No, actually, I think you need to be gone and just let this happen at some point."
It's so hard. I always had that mentality as well. And now, like being in it, I look like I have a friend who's like a really good about like scheduling time away, like for herself, and like will take trips and leave the kids like with her husband and like is really good about like doing all of that and like making sure that she has a good balance and uh like taking time for herself. And now that I'm in it, I'm just like I don't even understand that happened. And a lot of it is because he's still breastfeeding. And so, like,
Sure.
making sure that, like, there's enough, like, milk that he has access to is, like, the biggest stress. Uh, Other than that, like, yeah, everything, like, is it going to be perfect? Is it going to be as if
Yeah.
I was there? Absolutely not. But, like, okay, he'll survive. It's more about, like, me making sure that, like, he has what he needs so that I could be gone.
Well, and to be fair, for those of you who don't know, the my son Quentin, my wife and I adopted, and so the breastfeeding was not something that ever happened.
Right.
We just had formula the whole time. So
Yes. Yes.
we're never scheduling the feedings other than just And then, I mean, in some ways, to be honest, it worked out kind of nice because like I could do it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you know,
I lost you.
in my back.
Yes, you're back.
Okay. I like touched the cord, so I'm not going to move from here on out.
Okay. You're not allowed to talk with your hands anymore.
Nope. No more.
But anyways, so that's all swirling around in my brain. And you know what? It just means things are changing in the right direction. Oh, I didn't quite
No,
nail
that's
the
it's a
nail the
perfect
setup there.
transition.
Was it?
Yeah, that's good.
Now, if you guys are new to the podcast, you will quickly learn that Tyler and I like to catch up for like the first section of our podcast episodes. And then I try really hard to be like, you know what, we've been just chitting and chatting for a while. We should probably get down to business. And in my head, I try and find some way to tie what we were just talking about into the podcast topic. And it typically doesn't work.
It's called a transition for those of you who don't know the business lingo for it. And we are not professionals at it. We don't transit. Sometimes it like we will lob softballs to each other just to get the transition, but
Yes.
oh well,
Transition
we'll get there.
segue.
Exactly.
Yeah, anyways, didn't nail it that time, but that's okay because today we really wanted to chat about kind of how to navigate change. And I think I want to tackle this from a couple different angles, because I think this is where people get derailed a bit, either in their entrepreneurial journey, or in their career. Is just like when either the environment, well, yeah, I guess not either, just as the environment shifts and changes around you, your ability to also evolve with the changing environment is crucial, instead of feeling like you need to dig your heels in or fight the change, or kind of like get left behind as the environment evolves. And so I think coming at this from a couple of different perspectives, Tyler kind of in his career as things have changed, and how he's navigated that, and then same with just like the ever evolving door that is business ownership, but also just like as different platforms have changed and rules have changed, and like how we've navigated that and allowed ourselves to evolve with it, instead of, but yeah, like I said, kind of digging our heels in against it.
Well, and I think one thing to understand, which um I jokingly say a lot in the state of Idaho, we don't do very well, which is accept that the change is inevitable and that we're all going to have to deal with multiple phases, types of changes, like just like you said, whether it's you're starting a business from the way things operate, whether it's in your workplace and your boss changes, your role changes, what you need to do change. Um, but also like, and I think you highlighted and are highlighting it every week, a very hit home example of like even your family life
Yeah,
changes depending on, kids in the house, out of the house, you move, you take a different job, like things just evolve and you have to have the tools to equip yourself with change. And so hopefully as we go through these things, we can not only talk about it, but express some of our mindset and how we went into those things. And I will always say this, I think change can sometimes be uncomfortable, but there's always a lesson to be learned throughout change, and it makes you a better person. It's not always great going through it, but usually on the other side, and I'm a big proponent of both. You can learn something that is enhanced you, or you can learn some things you're like, you know what, I don't really want to carry that forward, but that's okay because I learned, I failed, and I know a different way to do it.
totally. So if you could come up with maybe like the 5 biggest ways either your role or your environment has changed in your career, like how could you summarize? Let's maybe do like the top 3
Yeah.
ways that you've experienced big change in your career.
I think one of the biggest ways that I've noticed, especially post, so I don't know what everyone who listens does, and I don't want to drag it back out because we all kind of roll our eyes or cringe a little bit, but COVID changed kind of a lot for the athletic training profession and just college in general. And it kind of made my role as an athletic trainer and a supervisor more encompassing to just about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in that, like we talk a lot about our pillars at work, which is like sports performance or strength and conditioning, athletic training, mental health, and nutrition. So we kind of put them all together. The biggest pivot I have seen in the workplace, and I'm sure those of you at home who have kids who have gone through it or just have other coworkers, nieces and nephews, the mental health aspect has just grown and taken a different. It, it was kind of like there was always that cliche around it where it was like, mental health, like tough it up, rub some dirt on it, you're fine, you don't need feelings, everything's great.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's really being brought to the forefront, and it's something that and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's something that you definitely have to learn, and you have to educate yourself as far as what to do. From my perspective, there were a lot of ways like I was kind of scared. I didn't know what to say. And that growth came from experience and learning. Like I deal with some kids that have some like, self-harm or suicidal ideation. And when
Mm-hmm.
you're not familiar with that, it's kind of terrifying. Like you're terrified to say the wrong thing. You're terrified, like, do I jump in and help? So a lot of those things and navigating that change was, um, and I will say this over and over again. I have a great friend, and coworker who I've known for 20 plus years, who's the director of our counseling services. And I was never afraid to ask her a question because I really truly didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you're navigating change, finding experts that can help you and not being afraid to ask those questions, but also in the same facet, it's very interesting because I think a lot of people don't want to ask those questions because they don't want to sound like they don't have the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Like I should know how to do this, specifically if it's in your field. But most people are just looking for like a guide, someone to help them. And if you're that person who knows how to get information, you navigate change a lot easier and a lot more effectively. If you're like, I don't know, and that's okay, but I will find an answer or I will find a solution to this problem.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Like, not only like seeking out answers to questions, but just like, yeah, letting your ego, like, it's hard when things are changing so rapidly, right? And like our guttural instinct in terms of like protecting our ego is to just like continue to roll with it, right? And like almost like the fake it till you make it mentality in almost like a negative way. Like that fake it till you make it mentality, I think can be really helpful. But when we get to a point where we're like masking the fact that like we don't have all of the answers and trying to show up as if we do, I think that just like does yourself and those around you like a huge disservice in terms of yeah, how you can come to the table with better, fuller, more complete, information, tools, whatever it might be. And so, yeah, I think in asking for help, asking tough questions, like the kind of precursor to all of that in navigating the change is like letting your ego chill out a little bit, right? Because that can roll almost like perfectly into where I've experienced change is like, you know, when I have experienced that, like either a platform changing or just kind of the market in general shifting or changing what people are looking for, how they're finding it, right? Like again, COVID really changed a ton when it comes to virtual services and how people were comfortable receiving those virtual services, all these different things, right? And like it was something I had never done. And I spent way too long, again, trying to figure it out on my own because my stupid ego was in the way and wasn't allowing me to get the support or, have somebody like there needs to be some balance between like seeking the answers from somebody who's two steps ahead, but also like kind of trialing by fire a bit. And when those two things come together, right, that's where we see a lot of forward momentum. But like you don't get that until you start asking the questions and getting the resources. And for that, like your ego needs to take a sidestep for a half second.
Well, and I think one thing when you were going through this, just to relate, if on another level, is I think also becoming a parent and doing this like with your spouse. Like there are times where Lindsay and I will just sit and be like, we don't may not have an answer, but just ask each other questions.
Yeah.
Be like, what am I missing? What are you seeing? What am I like? Because like things change a lot with kids. They change as they grow. They change as they hit different phases of life and school. And I think too frequently, like you said, we don't have those discussions about change and what we want this to look like. And then you have different expectations from each, like, well, this is what I was thinking. What were you thinking? And they're like, well, I was thinking something entirely different. And you're like, well,
Mhm.
shit, we're married and we spend every day together. We weren't even on the same page. So,
Right.
um, like you said, not having it, especially with whoever, coworkers, spouses, like letting your ego aside and just having an honest conversation and being able to navigate because change is going to happen where you would like to see it go, and like writing down, going through like what are the pitfalls of where we're going with this path and what are the positives, and kind of troubleshooting the whole thing.
Yeah. I also think that like ego taking a sidestep piece is the precursor to like the next thing I think about in terms of navigating change. It's like when we feel like we're in a really good groove and like we've got our feet underneath us and things are cooking along really well and like we feel like we're navigating things well, right? Like when things then either evolve or change, I think our ego wants to keep us rooted in the familiar or in what is what was working, and we like sometimes cling so tightly to what was working even if it's not working anymore because it was once working, right?
Right.
And instead of allowing yourself to set the ego aside and say, okay, what I was doing worked, hooray, celebrate that and
Mhm.
move forward, right? We cling to that because it feels safe and we can like, you know, our ego can feel safe that like we are doing something that once worked, right? And if like business ownership and parenthood have taught me that like you cannot get comfortable in like how you're operating essentially because like it is constantly evolving, and if you don't evolve with it, if you don't allow yourself to pivot, if you don't allow yourself to pivot and make mistakes and learn and change, right, like you are going to be so stuck and you're going to be left in the dust wondering why the world feels like a mess around you, right? Like in parenthood, I mean, oh my gosh, this kid changes every single day. You know, I feel like, we finally get into a good routine and then he starts solids. And so then like our routine is now, okay, how do we fit this in? And, okay, we have like kind of our rhythm of what we do, day over day. And pretty soon he's going to drop a nap. And so like, how our day is divided or separated and what we do in each kind of chunk of the day is going to be totally different in 4 weeks from now, right? Like everything is going to change again. And so like same with, business ownership. We, I think, sometimes get comfortable in, how we're showing up online, let's say, how we're showing up on Instagram. And, I like the best way that I can describe this is like, do you remember like the evolution of Instagram has been so interesting. So like before Reels, it was just like all of these like static posts. And so then Reels came out, and if you weren't willing to pivot, you got left in the dust, right? Because anybody who was posting Reels is like, that's what Instagram was pushing. And when Reels first came about, it was basically like lip syncing type voiceover type trends, or like transitions were like such a big thing, right? Like video transitions, or like
Yeah.
doing these little transitions during the video, and uh like that is just like such a thing of the past. Like people are looking for so much more just like long form, authentic, uh original content, and not just like rinse and repeat versions of the same trends over and over and over again. And so like it is forever changing. And so if you were somebody who really nailed it in the phase of Instagram Reels in its transitions era, right? And then all of a sudden it evolves and people are making more long form content, more educational content, more, original type content, less edited, more like day in my life, or, whatever it might be, right? And you're still here doing silly voiceovers and transitions, like that's like you're going to be stuck there and you're never going to continue to grow, right? And so I think in all of that, clinging to what was working um, is just like another way that your ego shows up, and doesn't allow you to move forward, because again, that's like uncomfortable, uncharted, um, and unknown, and like that then gives you the possibility of failure. And so then like your ego tries to keep you safe and keeps you clinging to, again, like a strategy that was once working. So like how do you consciously check in with yourself and say, okay, like what was working that isn't anymore, and what do I need to do differently? And sometimes it takes like a very conscious check in with yourself, because a lot of times that like doesn't come super naturally, especially when like I think our initial reaction is to just like blame other things as to why something's not working, right? Like blame all of these outside factors, when we need to look inward and say, okay, where do I need to shift and change my output to get the desired result that I'm looking for?
Yeah. And I think since we're relating this a little bit to my work, I really can't. I mean, if you've paid attention, so I work in collegiate athletics, and if any of you have watched the landscape of collegiate athletics, specifically, like if you look at who's in what conference and who plays what team, it is just every single day it is something brand new that doesn't make any sense to anyone that's in it, other than there are some TV people who are throwing billions of dollars, and that's the only thing that we can connect to why what's happening. So in that facet, I've learned a couple things, and that is um, basically flexibility or adaptability is a skill that we can practice and get better at throughout time. Um, like you were saying, as things change and pivot, the more that you can practice those different things, or practice staying, I don't want to say out of a routine. I'm a big routine based person, but for me, the biggest thing was like controlling the amount of, please forgive me, mom, the amount of shits I give about some of those things, and like prioritizing, like, okay, this isn't a big, I should care about this. So let's just roll with it and see where it goes, versus the bigger things you can dig your heels in a little bit more. But like the amount on a spectrum of things that I think sometimes we care about or get overblown when they mess with your ego and your routine. So you
Mm-hmm.
care about them a lot more than you're like, okay, this really is a minor thing. One thing, and I will steal it from him, and that I've learned that I'm still working on, but I think you alluded to it, and we talk about it ad nauseum. Sometimes, it's one of those catchphrases, but at the same time, in this case, it is super true. Like control your controllables. And that's in these situations, like, what can I control and what is out of my control? The way, if they're switching platforms or like videos are evolving and changing, and that's what's getting the most hits, that's kind of out of your realm of control. That's kind of controlled by the platform, the viewers, and everything else. So all you can do is control, like, what is my content? Does it look like that? And do I need to pivot and look like that? Because you
Mm,
can get mad and be like, that's not what my wheelhouse is. That's not what I'm good at. But it's out of your control, especially
yeah,
when you're on a platform like that that changes so rapidly. Like, we just are going to switch conferences. That's out of my control. All I can do is like, okay, how does this affect my job? How does this affect what I do? And then analyze that a little bit, but understand that I can control what I can control, and let's focus on prioritize those. And it makes that change a little bit more clear, and what
yeah,
you should have to do a little bit more clear.
totally. I mean, you've navigated so much change in like the last, 4 or 5 years in, COVID. We were talking about this a little bit before we started recording between COVID and just like changing different procedures within athletic training. Around the time that I left, maybe a couple years after I left, the entire structure of uh like the degree and the program changed, and which then also changed like the grad assistant type positions that used to be there, and then like the student help that you used to have, like that all changed. You changed sports after I left. You
I did.
changed, more recently you've changed entire coaching staff. Like, you have navigated so much change. And as a routine-based person, because I can relate to that so well, um, have you ever noticed a time when, amidst all of this change, you have clung to your routine almost to a fault? Like, did you ever notice a time where so much was changing around you, so you were like clinging to your routine, and that almost like hurt instead of helped? Like, was there ever a time where you realized like, oops, like I should have, evolved, or I was clinging to this as, things were changing around me? Like, have you ever like waited too long, or uh yeah, I guess like, again, as a routine-based person, I think sometimes I can relate to the like clinging to the routine out of sake of the routine, even when it's not serving you anymore, because everything else has changed around it. So it's like not as effective as it once was, if that makes sense. And it maybe took too long, or took like some sort of like wake up call to realize like, okay, the routine isn't serving me anymore.
I think in the routine based conversation, what I had to learn is I needed to take those things that I felt most were important throughout my day, and I needed to somewhat put them in boxes or blocks, and then understand that each day, like, you have different components in front of you. And then, like, this kind of, if you lay them out in front of you, this is what the day looks like. And really analyze, like, if this block always was at this time, like my workout is always at noon,
Yeah.
um, is it okay? Like, I learned to like put that block somewhere else in my schedule, because I can't control some of that. So what I tried to do is like keep the components of my routine that I felt were most valuable, but understand that I have to be flexible with possibly when those are going to go based on what comes at me the next day. My biggest, and I still do it to this day, and I get yelled at it quite frequently, is understanding that people messing with my routine was not something personal. It was just a reflection of their priorities and how they're getting stuff done.
Yeah.
Because I would take it super personal. Like, we're messing around with practice, or we're doing something today. And in my routine, I was going to work out at this point, and you didn't, like, now your practice is not letting me do that. And so I would get frustrated and upset because I was taking it personal where you're not really considering all the variables. But what that also led me to do in my routine is reflect on how can I change things so they don't have control over that. And I can, so like one thing I did this year is I used to always work out when I got home. And now I like kind of pivoted my schedule so I can do that first thing in the morning and go in a little bit late. But
Mhm.
when I do that, I took back control of my routine and didn't allow them to interfere with that later in the day. So in that way, I changed my routine and I did it probably like 5 years too late. Because if I would have been doing this a long time ago, I probably would have had better life balance. But that's probably one that I waited way too long. But now that I switched it, I feel like I have more control. And those other things that change affect me less because I got to do the things that help me prioritize my health and who I am in life versus trying to play that for chance or building a routine that was so thrown off by anyone else's
Dependent.
change
It
or
was so
depend.
dependent
Yeah.
on other people. Yeah.
Yeah. It is because if they messed that up, then I was screwed and I was like, oh crap. And then, so that's probably one example where I waited way too long to like pivot and do some of those things. I think, and I
Mhm.
don't, a lot of that stuff just changed in life. Like I go to bed a lot earlier than I used to, like I don't have a kid that gets me up all night, so going to bed is, somewhat easier. So,
That's helpful.
yes.
Yeah, I think that's huge, right? Like, I think for a lot of us, sometimes it's like almost in hindsight, we're like, damn, if we would have just done that earlier, like this would have been a lot different or a lot smoother, and you can play the what if game like all day long. But I think sometimes just having somebody to like bring attention to the fact that we do need to shift or change, or just like, I don't know, maybe just having a check-in with yourself or, your spouse or your coworkers or, people on your team or whatever, like what's working, what's not, like what am I clinging to, that isn't working, um, because it's comfortable, and that's ultimately like making things more uncomfortable because like as a result. And I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to navigating change. It's like change is inevitable, no matter if you're in business, or, some other facet of your career, whether that's self-imposed change or change that is sprung upon you, right? Like no matter what it is, being able to allow what you're doing to look different can make, I think, the change itself and just life so much easier than clinging to the familiar in it. What is it? The like, it almost relates to the like choose your hard type of thing,
Yeah.
right? Like, uh, yeah, you can be uncomfortable in the change, or like, think about weightlifting, right? Like you can be uncomfortable as you're lifting weights. Or if we choose not to do that activity, we can be uncomfortable in a body that doesn't do what we want it to do, when we're 50, 60, 70 years old, or even right now, right? Like, so in terms of change, like, same thing. We can cling to this like comfort that is uncomfortable, or we can get uncomfortable through change. And I think for a lot of us, having those check-ins with either coworkers, colleagues, spouses, kids, whatever it might be, like is going to be crucial in alleviating some of that discomfort in avoidance of change, but also through the change as well.
I think the other thing I thought a lot about is just because things change doesn't mean that, I mean, there's different levels, whether it's things at home, at work, at all this, but like one, just know that as things change, there's a high likelihood that they're going to change again. But for you, that like they just do all the time. It
Yeah.
seems like, especially when you have children, you're like, as soon as you get everything dialed in, they give you like this hard right turn, and you're like, well, shit, I thought I had this down and I didn't. But
Yeah.
the other part is like you get to keep playing with it and you get to find ways find your direction by finding ways that don't work. And I think that's what people lose sight of is like one thing we talk to a lot of clients about is like, oh, I need to work out. Well, when should I work out? First thing in the morning? Should I wait till after work? Should I wait till late at night? Like, and I always tell them like, D, all of the above. Let's try it for a while and see it. Like, and if you're like, this morning thing is not working, be like, great. And they're like,
Let's try
well,
to find somewhere else to plug
yeah,
it in.
because they're like, well, that's not great because I haven't been consistent. I was like, yeah, but we found a way that right now is just not going to work. And that's
So we
great.
should just take it off the table.
Just take it off the table. We know we're not going to talk about that anymore. So one's down. Let's go see, like plan C, D, and F. There's always a way to make things work. We just have to expand. And like you said, be a little bit more open. Just be like, and sometimes I will say in everything in life, I've learned this very much so from my coworkers. It helps to just laugh with each other and laugh at yourself and like, not always take everything so serious because if you get so entrenched in all that and so stressed by it, you don't enjoy it as much. Whereas sometimes like if you can just laugh and be like, here it comes again, you just navigate it a lot easier.
Totally. I agree 1,000%. I think that basically encompasses it, right? Like the big takeaways that I have from today are just this like ability to put your ego aside, ability to check in and like ask yourself, what am I doing in an effort to stay comfortable that's actually making things harder than they need to be? And what would it look like if I just shifted that a little bit? And then C, like allowing yourself to evolve through things so that you don't get, left behind as things continue to evolve forward. And so much of that has to do with like checking your ego at the door and allowing yourself to find comfort in knowing that things are constantly going to be changing instead of clinging to one way.
Sure.
And it not working, I guess, is a better way to describe it. One last question that's on my mind about change. Have you ever experienced changing something or feeling like you need to change something or doing something different because you're not getting the result that you want, but maybe you're changing too quickly or too rapidly and not giving the thing that you want enough time, right, to work? So like, how do you balance knowing when something needs to change, when you need to make a change versus when you need to stick with something or push through something, and allow it time like to click in? Can you think of any like circumstances like that?
Well, I think one thing I've always looked at, or I try to always look at change as an opportunity to learn and educate myself on whatever is going on, like wherever this new path is taking me. And I think if you continuously look at this as an opportunity, and I know we talk a lot like to grow, but also to educate yourself, because I feel like the more like, at least for me, the more I learn, the more I grow and stuff, the more my ego shrinks because I learn that I don't know much at all. And so to like be stuck in that is kind of humorous to me because I'm like, okay, like I know enough to know I don't know a whole lot. So why should, like I should just grow and go with it and find out where it is, where this path will lead us and learn the lessons along the way. But I always want to evaluate at different points of change. I like to ask a lot of questions and like, I think for me, what I like to do a lot just throughout the whole process as things come up in my mind, like through change, like through policies, through stuff at home, is as those questions come up, I just continuously ask my coworkers, I ask my boss, I ask my spouse, I ask just questions because the more information I get, the more I feel like that question, you all of a sudden like kind of get it in your gut, because I'm the person who will like stubbornly just keep doing what I'm doing because I'm just I it's part of that work ethic thing. Like like just keep going. We'll get there. We'll get there. But I like to ask a lot of questions because the more I reflect, the more I can get a clear vision if this is really working or not. But I can't get that unless I gather lots of information. I'm not a knee jerk. Let's go. Let's do this. Knee jerk this. It's like, okay, I want to ask Heidi this question. I want to ask Lindsay this question. I want to ask Abigail, my coworker, this question. And I want to like gather opinions and then over time be like, okay, I think I have a clear idea of my opinion of this, and it is either aligned, which means I should stay there, or it's
Mhm.
changed. So maybe I should pivot and take it in a different direction. The
Yeah.
hardest part for that for me of that question is the first thing that came to my mind was um just with our background was working out, lifting weights, like, and it's just step by step every day. So I'm a very trust the process. I don't let the wind take me to this modality and that modality, and now I'm going to be vegan and I'll be carnivore, and then I just have set a good path, and I'm just trusting that if I keep moving in this direction, I'll get there.
Yeah.
But that
Yeah.
doesn't mean I don't gather information to be like, well, maybe I need to look at this. But usually by the time, I think the other part is gathering information and giving it time. Like if we, every time a new diet came across, thought we needed to change directions, we would be we'd be ping ponging all over the place. But giving yourself time is also a benefit to be like, no, this kind of died out. So it couldn't be that big of a deal.
Yeah. I agree. Like, I think there's a balance between accepting and adapting, but also like not being, I can't think of a better word other than like flitty, like flitting from thing to thing, or like
Yeah.
shiny object syndrome, right? It's like
Yeah.
such a big thing in my space, like business owners who are like, okay, they like created this entire course and then they're like, okay, nobody wanted it. I'm going to create this entire course. I'm going to do this or I'm going to change that. And it's like, well, like, hang on. Like, do we have our foundation in place? Do we have what we need? Do we have like, is our messaging like, is all of these things in place, right? Before we change the thing, right? Like
Right.
maybe something else needs to be changed instead. Like that's, can be said for exercise. That could be said for, something going on in your work environment, right? Like the thing that we need to change on the surface, right? Like if we're constantly chasing, right? That's not the answer, right? There is like, there does, I'm losing my words, but there has to be some level of balance between
Sure.
like persevering through um adversity and not just like either giving up or changing your strategy every time something gets hard, while also like not being so rooted in one particular way that you do get left in the dust.
Yeah. I mean, everything in collegiate athletics is what do they have? What do we need to keep up with the Joneses? And sometimes it's not what do they have? Do we have what we need? Are we doing what we need to be doing? And then are we successful in it? Yes. All right, let's keep that on the back burner, but stay in our foundation. And that's what a lot of people have a hard time doing. That's what every day we talk a little bit about that in my work, because everything about collegiate athletics is what's the newest, shiniest object and why do they have it and we don't? That locker room has a sleeping lounge and, like all this stuff. And then you really have to tie it down as to like, okay, but what is essential? What do we need? And what is, like you said, what is a passing fancy for an old term that is just going to be there, and then in 2 years it was null and void. It didn't matter.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I agree 100%.
100%. Hundy P, as one of my friends used to say all the time.
NDP. Quick question
Yeah.
before we scoot. How is uh your I don't even know what I want to call it, but just like the thing that you're working on. How is that? How'd
My
that go?
boats, how are my boats doing?
Yes.
Um, the boats will be doing much better next week.
Okay.
Uh, just because we're gonna have a break. So some of my little boats will go back to their boat homes, and then I won't be in charge of the little boats.
That's good.
But I did, oh, help me, sweet little baby Jesus in a manger. I was like, after our conversation, I was like, you know what? I really want to get a hold of. We've been talking about the insurance thing, like people are not getting back to me. So I was like, I'm going to be actively reach out, and people are on vacations. And so my mind was just like, so that's
You
one
gonna
boat
do
that is
it?
just going to keep dragging with me until I get this done. But
Uh,
I think overall, having a little bit of time to get ahead of the curve. Um, and then, I mean, good in the fact where I've had a lot of honest conversations with coaches that I was never able to have before. So it's like, it's getting better. It's just the first year of transition is just tough. But I got a lot of people that I trust in my corner. So I think it's going to get better hopefully by spring. I know it's going to be a length of time. It's not going to all
mhm.
get fixed tomorrow. And so that
Totally.
helps as well. Yeah.
Good.
How about
Yeah.
you?
Um, I mean, I would say that over the last week, like we have just navigated some of the hardest things that we've ever navigated, and we just did it, right? And so it's like it almost helps put things in perspective in a way, like that, like even when shit is so bad, like you're still just gonna like figure it out, right? And like so I guess like good in a way. Like
Well, I mean, it's like,
in all of this
it,
shit, it like kind of
yeah.
teaches you a lesson of just like, yeah, like you are just going to figure it out because you have no other choice. Like you just have to figure it out. Sometimes like being put up in those situations makes all of the other like little stuff that used to like send me into a spiral feel a lot more insignificant.
Yeah, it's almost like this weird analogy in my head where like you're looking at just like this muddy, crappy, shitty swamp. And you're like, there's got to be a way around this. And you keep looking around and you're like, nope, we just got to get through it. And
The
then you
only way
get
is
through it.
through.
The only way is through. And like you said, it also provides perspective at some point. But you
Mhm.
also know, like, and I'm not saying you guys are thinking about this now, but like, you also know that you can get through it. And like, specifically, I know when we've gone through, like the dog situation, it brings perspective. And then, like, there's going to be some shitty days, but it's worth the trade off for years of this, animal loving you and being there for you all the time. So it just gives you that idea and that understanding that you can do it, and that, like, you know, it's hard, but that doesn't mean we can't get through it. That we can do hard things.
Yeah. I think that's like some of the perspective that I lost, or like that my postpartum anxiety kind of like shaded from me a little bit in a way. Like I've always been somebody that's like, we can do hard things, we can get through anything, like we're just gonna tackle it like one thing at a time. And it was almost like the anxiety like took a piece of that from me, and I could see it clearly. Like I could clearly see that like I was not handling those situations with that mentality. Oftentimes I'd see that like in retrospect, and I hated that. I hated that it was like I didn't feel like I was showing up as myself, and I was getting so easily overwhelmed and all of these different things. And I feel a piece of that like coming back in a way, um, of just like it's okay that it's hard,
Yeah.
like it's gonna be hard, and it's okay that it's hard, and like we're gonna get through it. And but like that was really hard for me to see for so long. Like when I was in it, it was so hard for me to see
Yeah.
that. And it seems almost silly to say. And so like I don't know if it's just like time and experience, or if it's like time, experience, and like my hormones are finally regulating a little
No,
bit.
I mean, that's real. And, in living with someone who's gone through a lot of anxiety, like it makes things more difficult because you're not thinking like like you said, it's who you both are, but there's almost just like a fog where you can't see it and you just
Yeah.
like don't know what to do.
Yeah. It
It
was
almost,
very hard to feel like I wasn't responding to things in a way that I knew that I could or would have responded otherwise. And so it was almost like double frustrating, right? Because like I was frustrated in how I was responding. And I was frustrated that I wasn't responding how I know that like I can respond to things.
yeah.
And so I was just like double effed, but
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
gotten a lot better. And so like, yeah, again, like this week, again, I think just like forced more practice in that
Sure.
sense, which was very unwanted, but
Yeah. I was gonna say sometimes life forces us in those situations that we're not comfortable with, but we can get through it. It just got to go through the shit.
I go through the shit. Okay, well, great episode. Change.
Change.
Some people are just not big change people. I hate
Yeah.
change. I can
I
think of a
live in a
couple
state with
off the
people
top
that
of my
hate
head.
change. I don't want nothing to do with change ever in life. So
That's so funny. I'm a perpetual mover. I already want to leave this house. We've only been here for 3 years, so.
we're not perpetual movers. We'll be in this house for a very long time.
Oh, that's so funny. All right. Well, thanks for joining us this week, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for being here.